You've done your math and you're like, I think I can only afford a $260,000 mortgage. Otherwise it'll be too tight. Don't let them upsell you.
Yes, don't do it.
Stick to your guns and really try to.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Mendoza Podcast, financial talk that makes sense. I'm your Illinois State Controller, Susanna Mendoza, and I want to help answer all the questions you have about money matters, but we're maybe afraid to ask. We're going to learn a lot and have some fun together. Hello, welcome back to the Mendoza Podcast. Today we're talking about housing, affordable housing, renting, mortgages, and housing assistance too. Joining me today is Kristin Faust, the Executive Director of the Illinois Housing Development Authority. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Thank you for joining the Mendoza Podcast, Kristin.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really want to say, Controller, when I realized you've been serving our state since 2016 through really hard times, not enough money, and then times where maybe we had more money than ever before with ARPA dollars coming in, that your consistent and commitment to excellence is really, it stands out. So I just want to thank you.
That's so sweet of you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been my honor and privilege, right? So fiscal discipline, restoring it, and making it part of the culture is really been one of my biggest goals. And the better we do with money, the more we can provide for the things that really have an impact, right, for our state and position it for better growth, more affordability. And that's what kind of housing is all about. So we're bringing it full circle with you here today. Thank you.
Right. We love that. We do the same thing at IDA. We're trying to deploy every dollar and get it out into the community and making it meaningful and impactful for housing.
That's right. So on that point, tell us a little bit about yourself, Kristin, and about IDA.
Sure. So I have been in housing policy and housing finance really my whole career, working in the public and private and nonprofit sector. And I have been pleased to be Executive Director of IDA, that's the Illinois Housing Development Authority, but we call it IDA, since 2019. And it's a great organization that's really dedicated to trying to make sure that everybody in the state has a decent and affordable place to live.
So that's the ultimate mission of the Illinois Housing Development Authority is everyone has a place to live who wants to have a roof over their head. And that is such a critical mission, right? We take it for granted that you have a pillow to put your head on, that you have a warm bed or a soft bed to sleep on, or firm, whatever you prefer, I guess.
Right.
But, you know, I think all states across America, our state is no exception. We still have challenges, right, of people who are unhoused, people who don't have that comfort, things that we take for granted. And so it's organizations, institutions really like yours with the state of Illinois that wake up every day thinking we've got to make a dent on homelessness, right? We need to make sure that housing insecurity becomes a thing of housing security. But, you know, like, what got you to want to be a part of making this change?
Well, personally, I will tell you that I grew up in a very mixed income and multiracial community. I actually was born in California. And so
welcome to Illinois, Kristin, the best state.
I love Illinois. I've been here a long time. I came to Chicago in my 20s and fell in love with it. But it turned out when you grow up a place, it's your norm, but you don't know how it's special really until you leave. And after I left, I realized, oh, the whole world is not like Sacramento, California. Because I grew up, my classmates, some of them rented, some of them were homeowners, some of them had big houses, some of them had small houses, some of them were on what we called Section 8 at that time. But we all came together at school, at work, at play, and got along well. And so that has been my vision, and I've really carried that vision with me everywhere I go. When I was offered the opportunity to join under the Pritzker administration to be the executive director of IDA, that was just a wonderful opportunity to bring my housing policy and housing finance expertise to a state that I am very much vested in and invested in, and have loved living here for decades now.
That's awesome. Well, we love having you as now
Thank you.
an official Illinoisan,
Yes,
right?
yes.
No longer California.
No.
Yeah, Illinois is the place to
just
be.
my family's there, but I only go home
well,
twice a year.
Well, we love your family. Yes.
There you go. Thank you.
And we don't want them to fall into the ocean, so
No.
please tell them to move to Illinois.
I tell them the Midwest is where it's at.
We're not going to fall into the lake unless if you choose to jump in, and it's fun.
It is. We have water.
Yes,
they don't have a lot of water out there, so
only salty water. No one wants to drink that. Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's get into the topics that I want to cover today. We're going to start with affordable housing. Okay. What does, for folks who don't know, I mean, you and I understand this, right? But we're not here to talk to each other. We're here to help inform people who might be listening and watching. Okay. You know, what does that mean exactly when we use the terms affordable housing, which you hear everywhere you go?
Yeah. Well, I think it means different things to different people. Yeah. But when I say affordable housing, to me, it means that you are living in housing that you can afford.
So it's not rocket science, right?
It's not rocket science.
Do we have enough of it?
We don't have enough of it, and there is kind of a definition that's really understood nationally, which is people should be spending about 30% of their income on housing. That's whether you're a homeowner or a renter, 30%. And actually, you know, if you go to apply for an apartment, they're going to look at your income and they're going to judge how much rent you can afford by using about that 30% ratio. Sure. And when you go to get a home mortgage, they also use a ratio that's pretty close to that 30% looking. They look at other things too. But
and that means, for example, if you go to apply for a mortgage and as a percentage of your income, the mortgage you're applying for is 60%, you will be denied that mortgage.
Correct.
During the housing crisis, that hadn't happened. Many people had been approved for mortgages that they were clearly on paper, should not have been eligible for, should not have been approved. But at that time, the folks passing those mortgages along stood to make money off of passing those through. And so we saw what happened with that. Many families lost everything. Yes. And certainly the economy tanked for everyone across the country, right? But the point is, don't sign up for more than you can afford. And I think in this climate that we're in, you're not going to be approved for more than you can afford at the mortgage side, but on the rental side, you might be, but then the landlord is putting themselves at risk of not collecting rents, correct? Correct.
You've said it. You said it perfectly. We had big holes in our system prior to 2008 and the Great Recession, the housing crisis. But a lot of laws were put in place to prevent lenders and that whole housing finance system from recreating that disastrous scenario. And some people even say that the pendulum swung too far. That now there are people out there that could afford to get into a house and aren't able to because they're being too strict.
Yes.
And so
and maybe like 35%. They can handle it if they're very fiscally disciplined.
Exactly. But, exactly. But I love your emphasis on fiscal discipline because you know, we support that too. One of the programs we support are housing counseling agencies, and I can talk about those more later if you like.
For sure.
But teaching those budgeting skills and living within your income. It's just that it can be really hard to do that these days, as you said, because affordability is such an issue.
Sure.
Right? And if you really can't find a place that is 30% of your income, can't find a place to live, what are you going to do?
Sure. I know it's super tough. And it's easy to just tell people, well, just move. But, you know, there's other factors at play, right? Like education, where do your kids go to school?
Right.
You know, did you lose an income that you had, you know, yesterday? Your husband or your wife get laid off and this income disappears. When you first bought the property, you thought you had your 30% income threshold, but all of a sudden you lose half of an income. Life changes, right? And so those are scary things, but they happen every single day. Right now, someone is getting the terrible news that they might have to foreclose on their home or that their loved one lost their job. And so I can't even imagine the level of stress that goes into that when you have a home to pay for or rent to pay for, schools to pay for, groceries to buy, medicine to buy. I mean, this is everyone's story, and by the grace of God, it could be me, right? And so, like, it could be any one of us. So having these conversations and understanding the why of why you shouldn't have more than 30% of your income addressed for housing needs is really important. And oftentimes we just don't have these conversations enough.
Yeah, I agree. And we fund these housing counseling agencies that run classes. They're usually free classes that teach budgeting. Also, they teach classes on how to prepare to buy a home, what other costs you might expect once you become a homeowner. And the housing counseling agencies we help support are across the state of Illinois, and they're all HUD certified housing counseling agencies. So I like to make that qualification. It means that their staff has gone through rigorous training on these very topics that you're talking about. They're there to help people while they're aspiring to become that homeowner, and they're also there to help people once you are a homeowner. If you have a moment of distress, you can also call them and they can help counsel you about what you can do. Yeah.
That's good. So now IHDA, let's call it IDA, just so I don't have to say like please. IHDA every time, or Illinois Housing Development Authority. Okay. IDA provides the financing to help build large multifamily developments across the entire state of Illinois. That's great. We love that. But who are the renters, filling these units, I guess? And how long can the units truly stay affordable for?
Oh, that's a great question. So our customer at IDA really truly is the developer, that is, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit developer that is building the apartment building. But when they get financing from us, and that financing is often below market rate financing, it might be some other governmental money that is a grant, more like a grant than a loan. It's attractive financing.
Sure. Because we want to encourage
more affordable housing. Sure. So we want to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Developer, it's usually a Mr. though, if you want to come.
We need more Mrs.
Yeah, we do.
All Mrs.
We
developers.
do. If you want to, we want you to build more affordable housing in Illinois, we can provide this attractive financing package. But in exchange, then we are asking of you that you need to own this building for 15 years and you have to keep it affordable for 30. So you can sell it after 15, but you have to keep it affordable for 30. And then
after 30, it just goes market rate?
It can go market rate, but actually one of the things we do at the back end is try to find new buyers that will agree to keep the buildings affordable. And then the developers are also signing on and in that they will agree to keep the rents at a certain level for that 15, 30 years. They also agree to have property inspections so that the properties are kept decent and a nice place to live.
It's important.
Yeah, it is. And then they also are asked to do a lot of compliance, and the tenant feels that because the tenant may have to submit income certification every year or every other year to show that, yes, I'm hoping to make more money one day, but right now I'm still right here. I'm earning this much. I'm earning, $42,000 a year or 36, whatever it is. And so that allows me to qualify for these units. We talk on the rental side with IDA and affordable housing. We use that term AMI, and people might hear that thrown around.
What does that mean for folks who don't know?
It means area median income. And basically, the laws and the funding pools are set up. You don't want it to go to people who don't need it, so you have to create a definition and draw a line somewhere. So most of our housing is for people who are at 60% of the area median income. The median is like, there's as many people earning above this number as below this number. So 60%, we think we're helping those that are in more need.
And that's of the area where the units are going.
Yes.
It's not of the whole state of Illinois.
Correct.
So for example, I think there's a myth or a misnomer as to what affordable housing means. And I think it has a negative connotation to it when in fact it shouldn't. Because to your point, it just means that you can afford to live there. It doesn't mean that it's, Section 8. It might be, but it doesn't have to be. It could be affordable housing in the Gold Coast as a point of reference. In downtown Chicago, in the Gold Coast, one of the most expensive parts, or an affordable housing unit in Lincoln Park. So they're not looking at the median income from, Southern Illinois to gauge what that affordable housing is. Affordable housing in the Gold Coast is still much more expensive to live in than affordable housing in a poor part of the city's urban center, right? So it just depends where you're at, but it means that, for example, maybe medical students who live in the area could afford to live in one of those units. They still have to have enough money to meet what that 60% of the AMI is, which would be, frankly, a lot more than if they were living in a different part of the city. But this is where it gets confusing because people just assume that affordable housing is this like dirty word that they don't want in their backyard.
If I'm really frank, I think people hear affordable housing still, and this is a way dated image, and they think dilapidated public housing projects.
That's right, and that's not
and
what
that
this
is not what this is. And we actually work with public housing authorities to help renovate their developments and build new ones. But what we've been doing at IDA for 50 years is joint venturing in a lot of ways and working with bringing the private sector together with public sector money to create really strong, solid mixed income communities and buildings. And I will say, not knowing exactly who's listening to this right now, but expecting it to be a broad range of people, that every single person listening to this right now has driven by an IDA financed building that is serving people. By the way, 60% median income in the Chicagoland area for a family of 3 is $64,800. So you've driven by a building where a working family with a kid they're living in that building. You've driven by that building. You're like, that's a great looking building. I'd like to live there someday. And you didn't know it. You didn't know that IDA had helped finance that building. And that's true across the state. We do this all across the state, 102 counties, and you cannot differentiate a property that we financed from a privately financed building. But what's different is that people of various different income levels get the opportunity to live in that place. And we work really hard at IDA to finance buildings that are in high opportunity areas, which means, and you said it earlier, near good schools, near jobs, close to transportation, right? And so that's really important to us because we know that that's where people will thrive the most.
Sure, it's that's what makes a community thrive, and it's what helps, from my perspective as controller, expand our tax base.
Yes.
Right? I am all about building as much as we can, growing our economy, having more people paying taxes because they're happy to live in a great city or a state that works instead of less people paying more in taxes for less benefit, right? Like that's kind of sometimes how it feels, and in order to change that narrative, we have to be pro-development in the sense of anyone should be looking at, here in the city specifically, which is where we're at, there's 77 neighborhoods. The ideal scenario, the vision, the dream would be that any person moving to Chicago or living in Chicago who wants to maybe have a different change of scenery, that they would have 77 neighborhoods from which to choose from, all great options, right? A combination of all types of housing. But more importantly, it's not just about the bricks and mortar, right? Like you guys are investing through your authority in building communities, not just building a building. Because you can have the nicest house, but if you walk out of it and there are no grocery stores, there aren't good schools, there's no public transportation. It's just a beautiful home, but outside of it, there's nothing. It's not a community. So really strategically deciding where to build this housing is much more than just the housing. It's really like you're betting on a neighborhood really being a community in a neighborhood. And that, I think, is a really great use of taxpayer dollars, right? We've got to get more people to acknowledge the bricks and mortar are just part of the equation,
right?
But the people moving into those neighborhoods and having access to all the things that truly make a home part of a community, that's even the other part of the challenge, right?
Absolutely, yes. You said it beautifully. And we have more demand for our resources than we have resources. We're oversubscribed usually 3-4 times to 1. And so we rank and score our applications that we get in to finance these developments. And the very things that you just named are exactly what we look for when we're saying, is this a good place to do the development? I do want to add that we do understand that there are some underinvested and disinvested communities that have come together. They've put together a community plan. They have a vision for what they want. They've gotten some started to get some investment. And then they say, if we could just build an apartment building too, a new
This would be
beautiful IDA
huge.
building, it would be a big attractor of other dollars. And so we will also invest in that type of neighborhood.
That's great, because
yeah.
we need more of that. And to that, you don't have to be the only financing company, right? There are
Right.
TIF dollars in certain underdeveloped neighborhoods that
Yep.
could be part of this like team effort, right? The city, the state, and it's all private investments, right? You look
Right.
at like Inglewood, for example. I talk about them a lot because they had a $10 million TIF investment that generated $50 million in private investment, right? So they now have a community health center. I think it's Oak Street Health Community Clinic. They have a grocery store. They have a Starbucks, a Chipotle.
Right.
I mean, this, it'd been
Yes.
40 years since there was any
Yep.
kind of development like that. They also have an affordable housing component that was part of that master plan. So here you have an opportunity to have TIF funds, coupled with other types of financing, federal, state, so it's like this is how you build agency and these communities, not just the housing, but the community itself. But you have to have, people that are willing to commit. And a neighborhood really certainly has to be involved in what the vision of their neighborhood should
Right.
look like, right?
Exactly.
Now, the authority has a ton of resources, or maybe I should say many resources, right? There's never enough for home buyers. But I want to talk about renting first. We've talked a
Okay.
little bit from the component of imagining people owning a home and a mortgage, but let's talk a little bit about renting. Renting might be, in fact, the best option for certain folks. There's
Absolutely.
there's
Absolutely.
like a menu of items. One could be owning a home, one could be renting a home. One can be owning a home and renting it out to someone else as an investment
yes,
vehicle,
yes,
right?
exactly.
So let's talk about renting as an option for many people. So in general, what advice would you offer to someone who's looking to rent an apartment, a condo, or a home? What are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
as a renter, I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier, which is you need to really do a budget. You need to understand what your income is, what you want to spend your money on, what you need to spend your money on, and identify what about 30% of your income looks like, and then go out and try to find an apartment that you can afford. It is harder and harder. We have seen apartment rents really skyrocket a lot, particularly in the last 5 years. And the housing counseling agencies, those HUD certified housing counseling agencies that we help fund, a lot of them now also do rental counseling.
Okay.
And so if you go online and type in, HUD certified counseling agencies, and you put in your zip code, they're going to show you agencies near you. And then you can look for if they do rental counseling. And they walk you through budgeting, and they also walk you through things like how to read a lease and how to look for a responsible landlord, and those
Sure.
kind of important facts and things that those of us who have been renters multiple times, you kind of get the hang of it. But when you're first starting out,
It's kinda scary.
It is kind of scary, and you don't know. And so we think that is a great step that the housing counseling agencies, which primarily worked on home ownership, are now also realizing there's a need to provide information and good knowledge to renters too.
For sure.
And believe me, I will just say, as I get very excited about home ownership, but all of us have been renters at some time, and only some of us will be homeowners. And so, I mean,
And that's
renting is
okay.
universal.
It's okay.
Totally okay.
I mean, I would
It's totally
love
okay.
that people, certainly in disenfranchised communities, really get into the mindset of home ownership. I think that, for me, one of my, I think, pet peeves or points of frustration is that in certain communities, and I'll just be blunt, in African American, Hispanic communities, minority communities, rental is what is pushed and built. And I feel that that's never going to get someone out of this cycle of always being a renter, right? Like when
Right.
generationally speaking, all your kids see is their mom and dad renting, home ownership
Right.
really becomes even further out of reach as an idea that's possible for them. Kind of like, I'm the first Hispanic elected statewide in the Democratic Party. Okay, that's cool, but it's cooler for the kid who now knows that they can also
Right.
run for statewide office and win, right? Or when I became the first woman elected city clerk, now women are like, of course, we should have been doing this a long time ago. But sometimes you have to see it and see yourself reflected in that to really believe it's
Absolutely.
possible. And so, think about, we learn from our parents. and if our parents have never been homeowners.
Right.
And too many Black folk and Hispanic folk have not been homeowners. They've kind of been put into a system when they're renting. And that's all they know. So like, if you think it's a little scary to get into renting your first apartment, it's way scarier to be a first-time homeowner when you've never had that in your life. And so I do think that, yes, renting is great for some people, but we should also have the mindset of teaching people how to eventually become homeowners. And we should build with that mentality in mind, because that's where you build generational wealth. That's a great investment vehicle for families who might not otherwise know how to invest in the stock market or be scared to do so. Sometimes that best first investment is, in fact, owning a home. And then you realize that you have skin in the game in keeping that home beautiful,
Right.
keeping it working,
right.
passing those lessons on to your kids. And then when it's your time, passing on that property to your kids so that they can have some generational wealth. I think it's really an important thing that we have to talk more about, because it is important to build, affordable rental units. But I do think that we don't do a good enough job of really educating and empowering communities of color to become homeowners, not beyond what they can afford, right? That's the
Right,
scary thing too,
right.
that I think for a moment people did become homeowners, then they got clobbered by the homeownership crisis, right?
Right.
The whole nation tanked, and they're like, that scared me. I don't want to go in that direction again. And so, yeah, it's a complicated, reality that we're living in. But you've got renters. I think you're seeing on the wealthier side of the equation that some people are choosing on purpose to rent, because they're saying, I'm going to rent under what I need, and the difference I'm going to put into the stock market. That's a sophisticated renter. You might
Right.
actually make more money than if you're buying a house that is tying up your income. But most people aren't sophisticated, investors. They need a place to live, right? And so that's where we're like, don't rent more than you can afford, don't buy more than you can afford. But I do think that we should be pushing this idea more so than we do of owning versus renting.
Well, we push it you are a poster child for Ida. Would you like a job? A different
got one,
job?
thank
Yes,
you,
a
yes.
great job. But we push and promote home ownership every day of the year at
Thank
Ida.
you.
And yes to everything you're saying. Again, I'm going back to these HUD-certified housing counseling agencies like NHS of Chicago, like Spanish Coalition for Homeless, but not for the homeless, Spanish Coalition for Housing,
Yeah.
and there's many others, and those are just two. There's these agencies all over the state. And I want to say their services are either free or very minimal. Some of them have started charging $25 or $50 for like a 3-week class. But their information is really good. You do not have to pay for this information. And
many times in multiple languages, right? It's
Oh,
different, like their
yes,
ethnic enclaves
absolutely.
that like say, hey, we're going to, the Polish community, the
Right.
Hispanic community, the you name it
Right.
community.
And they can teach you how to, what's a real estate broker do? Well, okay, how do I find a lender? What's a mortgage broker versus a bank, and where do I want to go to get a good loan? Fixed rate, adjustable rate, all of those things. There is a lot to home
Sure.
buying. But I will say a few things to make you maybe a bit encouraged.
Okay, good. Please give it to me.
So, the home ownership rate across Illinois is around 67%. And then we're blessed in a lot of our communities, particularly I know Chicago the best, but others, to have a lot of these 2 and 4 flats,
Yes.
which create a wonderful opportunity to live and also be a housing provider and rent out to somebody
Yes.
else. And it turns out that in the Chicagoland area, that African American Latinos have a very high ownership of those 2 to 4 flats.
That's great.
Which is really good, because that's a
Yes.
very valuable asset. And so we see that, and then we're trying to encourage more of that in terms of the importance of building new 2 to 4 flats, which can be hard, but it's really important, because most communities just want single family. Well, no, how about a duplex? You know, they really can go. They can help the owner with their economic stability, renting out the other side, and also it creates more housing for people.
For sure. What about, when we hear a lot of these big developments that happen with lots of apartments in them,
yes,
they're always rentals. I mean, where's the concept to have condos, right, where people can actually buy into it? Because I think with the rentals, the tenants, it's not theirs, right? So you don't have the skin in the game of like really making sure that everything stays, you know, as nice as possible, that if something breaks, you're like, you know, quick to fix it yourself,
yes,
right? You
yes.
understand that you've got to keep your place up. When it's like, I'm just going to be blunt. If you rent a car, I'm sorry, but you're not going to treat it as well as if it's your car, right? And the same is true for housing. The same is true for housing. We can pretend otherwise, but it's true. You really take care of the things when they're yours. So I see a lot of rental stuff, but I don't see enough. Not a critique on you guys at all. I'm just saying in general, whether it's here or anywhere else.
Housing. We're part of a giant housing market.
Like, how come we don't see as many opportunities to go, instead of the apartment rental in a multi-unit, to a condo type of thing? Many years ago, there was Mayor Daley had a neighborhood housing program. They were single-family homes where you could also, in fact, rent out a unit. And then the person bought them. So it was a home ownership for people. It was an affordable housing program. New Homes for Chicago.
It was New Homes for Chicago.
Yeah, and then they had to own it for at least 5 years before they had equity in it and could sell it or do anything. But that taught first-time homeowners about home ownership and caring for the property. And I'm just curious, and like, just educate me here. Why couldn't this concept work in a condo type setting where people own the unit, obviously understand that they have to take care of it, and then over time could have equity on that unit and sell it, and then that's, you know, what's the difference?
Right. I think, well, first I want to say that IDA provides a lot of tools to help people become homeowners. And the primary tool, because usually the number one kind of obstacle to owning a home is down payment assistance.
Yeah.
And so what we offer through IDA mortgages is we offer up to $10,000 in down payment assistance, which can help somebody,
That's a lot.
cross that. And we have a program where sometimes it's grant and sometimes it's deferred. And so that has been tremendously successful. And we have a very high proportion of Latino and African American home buyers that we serve. And in fact, Latino home buyers are growing very rapidly in the last 3 years, which is great to see. Now, where do people want to live, and what are developers willing to build? The condo market is kind of an outgrowth of how strong the real estate market is, where costs of construction are, and mortgage rates are, and appetite is. And so we don't see as many condos right now, and there's also liability issues around condos for developers.
Okay.
And so, and they vary by state to state and city to city even. And
so the math doesn't work.
The math doesn't always work right now. Instead, what you're seeing is a lot of luxury rentals going up everywhere. And what we want to start doing, and the governor convened a task force a year ago on missing middle. There's a missing middle housing need. Is we want to start seeing more apartment buildings that are not just luxury apartments, but are for people who maybe, are earn $150,000 a year. Even somebody in Chicago right now, a family earning $150,000 a year, which to me is a lot of money, often cannot find a good rental. And yes, I agree. Even me, when I rent a car, I do throw the garbage in the back seat sometimes, and I don't do that in my own car. But in general, renters
are good. Good renters.
And if the landlord has rules and enforces the rules, and the landlord, and so we want to have good, affordable rentals, not just for the folks at 60% of AMI, but we're actually seeing, and this is happening across the country, the need to go all the way up to even like 140, 150% of that AMI number.
Wow.
And so that's what we're hoping. We're exploring some tools right now to see what we can do to encourage developers to do that. And I do think the condo market will come back too.
Middle.
Yeah, the condo market will come back too. But
they're all skittish from 2008, no doubt. And in fact, I lived in an apartment. I rented, so like I've been on both sides of the equation. I rented an apartment. It's like a 3-bedroom with my husband in Andersonville / we were like in that funky corner. We were on the Andersonville
Yes.
side, which is a bummer for this story. Andersonville's great.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. I take it back. We were on the Ravenswood side.
Ravenswood side.
Ravenswood side.
Okay.
Fantastic, right? Directly across the street is Uptown.
Yes.
And directly across the street from us on the Ravenswood side was Andersonville.
Yes.
Okay. But because we lived on the Ravenswood side, when the building switched management, boom, my rent went up like
they went up.
$800.
Right.
And I was
Can
like,
you imagine?
what?
Yeah.
I can't afford this.
No one can
and we
afford
both
that.
are gainfully employed. And I told my husband that this is nuts. Like, it's
Yeah.
time for us to stop paying somebody else to own this building and let's, look to buy a house.
Right.
And so we now live in Portage Park, and, we're paying a mortgage in Portage Park, and we love our house. But it became like unaffordable.
Right.
And now on the Uptown side, it didn't go up nearly as much, even though it's like literally the same neighborhood. We're right in this, it looks the same, but depending on where you're at, what your zip code and what exact street you're on, is that your rents are going to be either affordable or unaffordable. Have you ever seen The Hunger Games?
My daughter read the books, but I never saw it. But I know the theme.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say
I know
yes.
the theme.
I've
Sorry.
seen it. You know what? Not just in the movies, but like with my friends when they're talking about trying to get an affordable rental.
No, exactly. I agree.
It is like the Hunger Games.
I know, and that is crazy.
It is.
Because we don't need, for our young families, for our young people, even singles, couples, young families, and not so young families, they don't need that stress. And particularly in our cities and where our job growth areas across Illinois, whether it's Rockford or Bloomington, we want those families, if they're not quite ready for home ownership or for a certain reason it's not for them right now, we want them to be able to find a good rental with good schools that they can afford. And so we're really working hard on doing more. I mean, every year we finance about 3,000 rental units across the state.
That's amazing. I mean, that's really great.
Yeah,
Kristin.
and
3,000 people, right? Who have the ability to stay in a home that they like or an apartment that works for them, that has the things necessary for them to plan for the future, right?
But we want
really
to do more. We want to do more, and we're fighting like heck to keep our federal resources. And
oh boy, that's like the subject of a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, we'll talk about it another time. But
let me ask you this. So it sounds positive. Everything we're talking about is like thinking about the future, getting people into rents they can afford. What happens? Someone loses their job. A renter now is facing eviction because they can't afford to pay. Are there any emergency rental assistance programs available with IDA? I should say specifically.
I am so glad you asked that, because actually, IDA is kind of a under the radar agency for many years, but we've really been working to shine more of a light on it so people understand what it does and its importance in the housing ecosystem in Illinois. And one way a lot of people started hearing about us was during COVID, when we did run an emergency rental assistance program and an emergency mortgage program. Those dollars and those programs have ended, thank goodness, because the need has ended. COVID is over, people are back at work. And yet what we learned is, and you said it earlier, you're so in tune, I think, with this economy and the people in the economy and the fact that people's incomes are volatile. They're not always stable and certain. So we know that there are people who find themselves, they've, just like you said, lost their job, and it's going to take them a couple months to get back on their feet. What can they do? There's some kind of emergency that makes it so they cannot pay their rent. So we now have a courtroom-based rental assistance program. What that means is if your landlord has filed eviction notice to you, that you are able to file an application. You have to do it in conjunction with your landlord. And the court system is a partner in this. There's mediation, there's listening, and there's resolution. And we are finding that the vast majority of those cases where our funds are able to kind of resolve the situation and people are able to stay in their apartment, which is usually better for everybody. If that isn't if really it looks like the change or the problem is more long term and you really do need to find a place that you can afford, we also are able to fund 2 months rent going forward for the next place. And this has been a lifesaver program, I think. We helped I believe it was about 7,000 households last year with this program. And I feel really good about it because it's kind of lessons learned from COVID. Best practices, and best practices is if you can help people stay, don't let them lose their apartment. Don't let them lose their house if you can help it. It's actually better, cheaper, and psychologically more helpful for the tenant for sure, but it's better for everybody. It's better for everybody.
So like in a case like that, and I think, I'm going to say something that might come off as like controversial. I don't think it should be, but
Okay.
A lot of the policy that's written is actually meant to basically just help the renter. But it's like landlords have been villainized, I think, in a big way over the years, especially most recently, as like people who just want to evict people too. And that's not the case. And like the landlords had to make a huge investment in the property. If someone's not paying your rent, the landlord then might actually lose the building because they can't pay their mortgage.
Absolutely.
So it's really like a team effort. It is true that we want to protect renters, absolutely,
Yes.
but we also need to be protecting those homeowners who have put their life savings into a property that they are trusting the renter is going to meet their end of the deal. So when these situations happen, where a landlord isn't being paid for 2, 3, 6 months, because then even if you go through the eviction process, you're not collecting rent, and they might get another 3 months, and then another 3 months after that from the courts. Is there like a help for not just the renter, but also the landlord who's in that situation?
No, you said it really well. Landlords, housing providers, whatever you want to call them, they are a fundamental and necessary part of our housing system. We have an amazing network in the Chicagoland area of these apartment building owners who are not giant corporations housed in some other state. They're not hedge funds. They're guys and a few gals.
We need more gals. It's Women's History Month. Come on, girls.
Who own 2 or 3 courtyard buildings in Rogers Park or in Chatham or all over the city. And then they make their living doing this. And every single landlord I know has cut a break for their tenant because it's in everyone's best interest if you can work something out. And our courtroom-based rental assistance program, it totally respects that mutual relationship. The landlord and the tenant both apply. There's a mediation. Both parties have to agree so that the landlord feels that they're made whole, and then the tenant is allowed to stay. Or, like I said, in some cases, the tenant will do what we call graceful exit. But then there's no eviction put on the record. It's been proven, and Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted, but it was based on a lot of research, that once somebody has an eviction on their record, they kind of become destined to, it's very hard
it's
to
like
find
a scarlet letter for sure.
Yes, because then you're kind of destined to have to live in a substandard property, most likely, and then that's not good. And so, but to your point, very much so. I mean, IDA's, a lot of our work, we rely on developers that want to go build new apartment buildings or rehab their apartment buildings, and we work with them day in, day out. And you're right, they do get unfairly villainized a lot.
I mean, obviously, we want to completely eradicate and crack down hard on slum landlords.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm the first to do that. I had legislation on that when I was a state representative. There was a slum landlord. One of the reasons why I actually ran for office back when I was 25 years old was because there was a family in my district who she died because of carbon monoxide poisoning, and her 2 daughters died along with her. Yes, it was horrific. And the landlord, get this landlord who had a ton of violations on him, came in because they weren't answering, not picking up the rent, right? And came in to the unit, walked over the bodies, took out the carbon monoxide detector, installed a new one. And this all came out through an investigation because when they pulled the new carbon monoxide detector off the wall, it had soot on it, right? So this was clearly a brand spanking new carbon monoxide detector that was put in there, but they all died from carbon monoxide poisoning. And so you think this should be criminal, right? Hard to prove, but clearly that's what happened. That's what all the investigators thought happened. And so I had introduced a piece of legislation called the Robb Act that dealt with that, passed it, and I won't get into the particulars, but the point is, that's a slum landlord. He should never own another building in Chicago. Someone who would be that callous to do that, when he should have made sure that his units were working correctly, right? So the brother of, Mrs. Robb, that was his twin sister. It's the only family he had, and he reached out to me when that happened, and it was heartbreaking, but we would never want something like that to happen. And of course, slum landlords need to go. But it's also like this symbiotic relationship. In order for it to work, you need a landlord and you need a renter.
Right.
The landlord benefits from the renter benefits from the landlord. And when these two are at odds, it doesn't work, right? And so it doesn't help us to have an unhoused person plus a landlord who now lost their property, right?
Right, exactly.
We're worse off.
So the only silver lining, I think, to that story is that it got you to run for office.
It did.
And
I won. So, so specifically, like, what are the types of programs if someone's struggling and they're facing eviction, where do they go?
They actually go in the courtroom, and they can be referred, and we have
through
a website.
Through the eviction process, and they connect them with you.
Yes, and they can go to the ida.org website and get more information, ihda.org website, and get more information.
And if you are one of the folks who's struggling with rental, like, don't wait until you go to court. Like, try to get ahead of that as much as possible and seek guidance and resources to see if there's a way to get there before someone files to evict you from their property.
Exactly.
Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who wants to be a home buyer for the first time? You've been renting,
right.
You have the itch to be a homeowner. If that was me, what's your advice that you're going to give me? And
I would find a good educational program. For you, it might be a 3-hour online course that you do pay $97 to take, but you know that it's been HUD certified.
Okay, let's not say me.
Okay.
Like, I've never owned a home. You look like me, maybe 20 years younger.
Okay, so there you go. So for some people, it might be, really, but for other people, they might really benefit from an in-person class, and some of the counseling agencies still run in-person classes.
And a lot of them do it for free, correct?
And, yes, mostly all for free. And then, and so we like to promote the HUD certified housing counseling agencies as a great place to get education. They run online classes. Usually it's a series of 4 classes, maybe over 2 hours for 4 Saturdays or something like that. So you get to decide, are you going to show up, more likely to show up online or in person, and condensed or a little longer. And but there's good information out there, and you should really not expect to pay much money. I want to hesitate because some of the nonprofits
might charge
a very minimal fee.
Sure.
A fee, but if you don't.
But it might save you a ton of money in the long run, right? Either in saying you're not ready yet, like your fundamentals don't work yet.
Yes.
Maybe wait a little bit longer before you pull the trigger on that, or you're ready, and here's what you need to know about how to get started. Correct?
Exactly, and then they're going to introduce you. A lot of those classes will talk about how you find a realtor, how you find a loan officer, what a good mortgage looks like. All of that they're going to walk, and then once you get into the house, home ownership is expensive. It's not just the mortgage and the insurance and taxes.
Yeah, and by the way, there's multiple mortgages types, right?
Yes.
There's a 15-year, a 30-year, a variable rate, right? Talk a little bit about that, and then from that go to the things beyond the mortgage, because we just think, can I afford the mortgage? But there's a lot more to it.
That's great. So, and I will just add on that, like I'm saying, go find a class or go online, look for these HUD certified housing counseling agencies, but also talk to your friends that have done it.
Yeah.
Talk to your parents if you had parents that own a house, if you're lucky enough to have that. Talk to other people, but then make sure you go to a very reliable source to verify all that information. Yes. Because we do all deal in not always good facts sometimes. And so, go right to the source when you want to know. And then in terms of other things to think about, so mortgages. So to get an IDA mortgage, we basically only offer 30-year fixed rates.
Okay.
That means you have 30 years to pay off this purchase, And there are many people who buy a house and stay in it all 30 years and literally pay off their mortgage at the end of 30 years. The average time in a house these days in America, it's lengthening. I think it's getting closer to more like 9 to 10 years. But then people will sometimes sell. They have to move for jobs or they want a different location. And so then you're not going to pay off your whole mortgage, but you'll by year 10, but you'll sell, pay off the mortgage, and go get a new mortgage. 30-year fixed gives you what that mortgage payment's going to be, the principal and interest for all 30 years. There are adjustable rate mortgages. That means your rate is fixed. Say it's a 5-year ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, ARM. Your rate is fixed for the first 5 years, and then you have to read the details. Maybe it adjusts every 5 years after that, or every 3 years after that, or every 10 years after that. And it's going to adjust to some kind of index. And it's going to be indexed usually to a national or international interest rate. And so you're not going to know what your rate would index to in year 6 when it changes. But sometimes they have caps. So it won't go too high. And then you need to do the math and figure out, like in year 6, will I be earning enough money that if this mortgage rate went all the way up, that I could still handle it. What you don't, because we are working with people, I would say modest and middle income home buyers.
Can I just say, avoid it at all costs?
We don't recommend ARMs. There are sophisticated people who are like, no, I'm going to do this 5-year ARM.
But for this new person, if you're not super savvy at managing money and like looking at this from the math works for me because I only intend to be in this place for 2 or 3 years and then sell it under different conditions. If you plan on living in that home for a long time, it makes no sense to take an ARM.
And look, right now,
because they're going to take an arm and a leg in your head.
I agree. And right now, interest rates, they're around 6.5%, 6.25%, 6.75%. That sounds high to a lot of people, but I have to tell you, those of us who have been around a few
My parents bought a house in the 80s, and it was like in the double digits.
Yes, and so I think we have to get used to those rates again, and not our advice. Kristin's advice is if you want to own and you can, get in now. Don't play the interest rate game. Just if you can get in now, you can refi later. If rates really drop, you can refi. Because,
and by the way, with an ARM, they're never going to go down.
No.
Your point is that we can maybe cap them.
Yes.
They can't be like a predatory loan, but essentially it feels like that if you're in an ARM that you can't afford. But they're never going to go down. So it's what you have or more. Whereas when you're in a fixed mortgage, if you found that home that you really think is going to be your home, go if you can afford it at your 30% rate, go ahead, get it, and then you can always refinance if those interest rates go down, and it makes sense to do so with the math.
That's it. And so. So we only offer the 30-year fixed rate mortgages. We do offer down payment assistance because we know the price of housing has gone up also tremendously in the last, 5 years. And wages have gone up some, but not at to the same degree.
Right.
And so people are saving. You still have to save. You still have to have your own skin in the game to get your mortgage. But you
you give assistance. $10,000 isn't going to get you a mortgage,
but
it certainly helps get you there.
Exactly.
So now we talked about the mortgages, a bunch of different kinds. You should absolutely do your homework before looking to own a home. But it's not just the mortgage.
No.
What else is there that people don't think about when they're first-time buyers?
Right. So when you have your mortgage, your lender is you're going to pay your principal and interest on your mortgage, and then they're going to add in your property taxes and property insurance. And you might start hearing those words PITI, and that's what that is: principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And for years and years and years and years, taxes and insurance were not extremely volatile, or they didn't change that much. There might have been a small but slow increase. And so your mortgage payment actually can change if your property taxes go up or your insurance. So we all know there's a lot of conversation always about property taxes, and property taxes have been going up. So that's going to make your mortgage payment go up.
And by the way, when people who have never done this before, they'll go on, you'll be on your computer and or if you Google, buying a house, right? All of a sudden you'll get all these ads and stuff about like, check out our mortgage calculator. And
Right.
you put in how much money you make, and then it'll tell you how much of a house you can afford. But you ever notice they don't include property taxes with that?
Yeah.
And so people right off the bat are thinking, I can afford this, when they're not calculating into even the basic property taxes associated with that specific property that you might be looking for. So it's really important to not just look at the brute number on a little
Exactly.
like mortgage calculator,
Exactly.
but then add in a boatload more for property taxes and of course your insurance. And as we know, anybody who got a bill who owns a home in December, it was like,
Yeah. They're
eye-popping
been going
how
up
much property taxes
in Cook County
increased.
for sure. And I will say that insurance is also, for the first time, the last few years,
Going up.
property insurance for homeowners has also started to go up a lot.
And that's not because of
um,
anything happening in Illinois, it's because of what happened in California
It
and in
is.
Florida, and we're paying the price for.
Right. And so you do need to be aware that while your principal and interest will be fixed, that you need to expect that taxes insurance can increase, and kind of build that into your thinking. The other thing that will happen, to your point, is that when you're ready to go buy a house and look at houses, a realtor is going to want to know how much do you qualify for.
Sure.
And so to do that, you have to go to a lender and you get a pre-qualification letter. And they are going to, when they tell you how much you'll qualify for, they will factor in, principal and interest, of course, and taxes and insurance. But and so that's very valuable, and then you can go and you can have a sense. But if you've done your own math and they're telling you, oh, you can afford, a mortgage, a $300,000 mortgage, and you've done your math and you're like, I think I can only afford a $260,000 mortgage, otherwise it'll be too tight. Don't let them upsell you.
Yes, don't do it.
Stick to your guns and really try to.
Amen to that.
Yeah,
Yes, they're always going to want to sell you more than you need.
Yes, the mortgage lender,
They make money off
the
of
realtor, they're all
yes.
making their commissions off of your purchase price and your loan amount, which is fine. We understand that. That's how the system works. But just know that it's to their
Yes.
benefit to have it be
Kind of like
higher.
when you're at a restaurant and you ask the server, so what's your recommendation? And they go for the most expensive item.
Yes,
it's because their tip is going to be bigger, right? So
Exactly.
it's really kind of like just bringing it down to that. Okay, so we talked about mortgage. We talked about the hidden costs at first for someone who
Right.
doesn't know, like property taxes or insurance. You know what else? Home repairs.
There you go.
Do you have assistance programs through IDA for home repairs?
So our assistance programs for home repairs, we do have a program, it's called HRAP, and we give out grants once a year, but our grants are going to local governments and nonprofit organizations.
And then they decide
and
who
then
gets them for things.
Yes, and
Got
so, but you can go on our website, again, ida.org, ihda.org, and type in where you live and look for HRAP and see who that provider is there. And yeah, we put out millions of dollars a year to help. A lot of times it's elderly homeowners or people who have a disability and now need ramps.
Sure,
but
that's
we do
common
roofs and
example.
porches. We do all kinds of home repairs. The average age of a house in Illinois is over 50 years old now. So people need home repairs. It's a huge need.
So we talked a little bit about what happens if you are a renter and you're facing eviction. And right now we've been talking about home ownership. So does IDA have assistance for people who are facing foreclosure?
Right.
Not so much eviction, but foreclosure because their house is, unaffordable for them. I mean, what can you do to help them keep their home? Is that possible?
So we do not have a set program right now. Usually when those programs have happened, it's been at times of extreme crisis, like 2008 or like during COVID, and the money came from the federal government. We were able to deploy it, and pass it through. And people have learned a lot. All of us have learned so much, particularly since that 2008 housing crisis. So if you are starting to struggle, I would say do two things, paying your mortgage. First of all, on your mortgage statement, whether it's electronic or paper, there is a phone number for your loan servicer. and it will say customer service number. You need to call that number and you need to talk to them. And actually, that's a good thing to do. You don't have to hide. They know that everybody loses money when there's a foreclosure. It's not just devastating for the homeowner. And so it's in their interest to try to help you. And sometimes they'll make an accommodation. There's ways, different ways they can make accommodations. They can put you in forbearance for a few months, and then they tack that on to the end of the mortgage. They're not going to give you anything, but you know. And so, I would call them, but I would also immediately call, once again, those HUD certified mortgage counselors. They have specialists who work in foreclosure. They know all the servicers. They can help you with your particular situation, and talk you through it and help you create a plan to address your current situation. What we saw in 2008, and it was so sad, is that the systems are better now for helping. That, believe it or not, the servicers are better now at helping. But back then, they didn't know how to help. And
there were so many people that needed the help at one time.
And then, but if you asked early enough, you know, we started putting supports, and nonprofits came together, and the government to help. But people, if you waited till the last minute, if the counseling agencies get the call on Monday, and you're going to court on Wednesday, that's going to be really, really, really hard for them to do anything.
Sure.
But so call them early, and you'd be surprised that there really are programs and strategies and good, fair, legitimate ways to help you while you're having that, you know, momentary crisis.
Sure. Well, let me just say, it's been such a treat to have you here. You are doing amazing work over at IDA. Thank you for all the incredible stuff that's happening that's going to strengthen our economy, strengthen affordability, give people access to affordable housing. Also, I think, like, if I walk away with any word that you probably used the most today during this podcast, it was a variant of the word help, right? So, like, we're talking about all the positive things, and everyone loves to be happy and own their home or rent where they can afford. But the reality is that some people aren't. And help is a key thing that you should seek as soon as possible. Also realizing that it's really hard for people to want to ask for help. That's probably the biggest obstacle to getting the help, is admitting that you need it and putting your own self-confidence or your own dignity aside for a moment to seek that help. And so I can't implore people enough to understand that it can happen to anyone. It could happen to you tomorrow, to me tomorrow, and knowing that there's a whole universe of people out there that potentially have resources to help guide you, even potential financial resources for you. To your point, calling your own mortgage lender and saying, I'm in trouble, I don't want to default, like, can you help me figure out how to keep my home before you get to missing those payments, or when you're missing that first payment, right? Like, it's hard to ask for help. I think that's the hardest thing for anyone to do, but it's the most important step in avoiding a compounded problem down the road. So thank you for everything you do, but if you're watching and you are doing great with your housing and you found that great apartment, and also thanks to IDA, great, congratulations. If you're someone who's struggling right now, like, know that you should go online and Google, housing assistance help or counseling. There's no shame in that. It's actually a very powerful thing to empower yourself through knowledge. And so the work that you do, I commend you for doing it every day, Kristin. Thank you for choosing Illinois as your home state now.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you'll recruit your family to our great state.
Yes.
But thank you for watching, because look, affordable housing is such an important issue. It means the world to me that we're having this discussion, Kristin. And the Illinois Housing Development Authority truly does offer help to both renters and homeowners, and is a great place to get started with those answers to many of your questions. I promise you, it's not the first time they're asked the question, and it will hopefully be the first time you ask it and get help for it. Thanks again, Kristin. It's been awesome to have you on.
This is
and
terrific.
I'll see you all on the next episode of the Mendoza Podcast.